going. Okay, so one, thank you all for being here today. I'm very excited to have an opportunity to talk about this topic. It's one that is near and dear in my heart. For those of you that have not attended a program with ASAOE before or have not worked with me in the past, my name is Melissa Walker. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the current organizational development manager for the state of Colorado, as well as being a facilitator for ASAOE. Those of you that have worked with me in the past, you might know me from my tenure at Penn State University, where I was the director of the TRIO Training Academy. A lot of the things that we're doing with ASAOE, you'll notice, revolve around advocacy in one way or another, either to help you advocate for your students or advocate for yourself. And so very excited to bring part of this particular Transforming Workplace Conversations presentation to you as a space of advocacy, for me, as a space of self-advocacy. Housekeeping in general for the presentation, please feel free to show up in whatever way makes you comfortable. Use your emojis, raise your hand, type into chat, unmute yourself. I'm happy to do all of those types of reactions and engage in any way that works for you. For me, you're going to notice that there's a cat. There's a cat. There's nothing I can do about the cat. The cat will be in the screen at some point. You will see his tail. I have tried everything. I don't want to lock her out. And so, yeah. Just be aware, there's a cat. It's part of it now. Yay, cats. It's really funny as a kind of an anecdotal side. My team at the state of Colorado, we all have black cats. And now, so on our intranet page, we have like the mascot section and it's all just pictures of our cats. So we're super professional there. So it is not wearing a hat, but thank you for that. All right, so I'm going to jump into the presentation. Again, feel free, show up in any way that is most comfortable for you. It's going to be just one brief second to get myself in present mode. There we go. And I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so as you notice, this is part of the Transforming Workplace Conversations. So one of the things that we've been trying to do at ASAOE has been very intentional about how we're creating some of our programming. And so during one of our kind of team meetings where we were discussing the best ways to come about advocacy and self-advocacy, I was like, you know what, and this was a group collaborative effort, was how we talk about things at work. And this can be impactful not only for ourselves, but also when we consider how we lead and how we advocate. We lead and advocate how we're led and advocated for. And then, of course, you know, we have our own moments of critical thought in which we come back in and decide that we need to change the whole thing. And so a little bit of that is how we can kind of change the dynamics in the workplace and have conversations that are really inclusive, that really create that sense of belonging. So it is more about not just DEI work and not just creating equity and not just belongingness and not just justice, but being intentional. And language is a big part of that. So today we're talking about neurodiversity. And kind of as we move into this, this is what we're going to go over today. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about ASE, which I've shared a little bit. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about me. So you're going to get a little bit more of my story. And for those of you that have attended presentations with me before, you know, you're going to get my whole history and who knows, nuggets about my family and childhood. It's all there. It's all open book. I have a little disclaimer for you. I'm going to do a little bit of presenting and we're going to have some conclusions and an opportunity for you guys to ask some questions. So the first thing is just about ASAOE, and very quickly, as I mentioned before, ASAOE is a nonprofit organization that specifically develops professional development content and experiences for professionals who advocate for students, advocate for themselves, advocate for other professionals. This is about arming you with knowledge and resources that you can use to kind of transform either your workplace, your environment, the school that you're working in. And TRIO, honestly, is just a great community to really kind of delve into these conversations because there's so many realms in which this is impacted. Okay, so about me. So my name is Melissa Walker, as I said. Um, I self-diagnosed in 2015. This was after the birth of my son in 2013. After a couple of years of kind of leading into this and having a lot of conversations with doctors and other people in the autism realm, realizing that my son is autistic. um, Notice like there was started to be a lot of conversations between me and my husband about our own potential neurodiversity because yeah. And this is pretty common. You're going to see, especially if you're part of the autistic community in different realms of social media and other areas, a lot of parents realize that there are connections when they start when they notice behaviors and things that are duplicated, replicated, and showing up in their children that they themselves have personified. And so you have those moments of like, huh, I too like soft fabrics. And I'm being very kind of pithy right there, but those little things start popping out. I was formally diagnosed in 2021. And an interesting story to that one, it is incredibly difficult to get diagnosed as an adult. It is doubly so to get a diagnosis as an adult female. And then of course, that just continues to move forward as you think about persons of color, socioeconomic status, and things like that. Privilege exists in all these realms. But in 2021, I did formally get diagnosed. This was while I was still at Penn State University. And I remember one evening kind of hanging out with my team and mentioning it to one of my team members of, hey, yeah, I'm actually seeking a formal diagnosis. And she looked at me and she says, oh my gosh, don't do that. And don't tell anybody if you do. And that was my first introduction to what it would be like to have this diagnosis out in the open. So with that kind of fear that I didn't understand, and also my own self, my feelings around whether or not I could own this particular diagnosis, I didn't tell anybody. I kept it to myself for the longest time. And a big part of it is that I've been masking my whole life and I didn't even realize it. Like I knew I was out of step. I knew that it was off somewhere. And like people would say things to me like, gosh, that sounded terrible. Did you even hear what you said? And I'm like, no, but could you please explain it to me? Because I really don't get like how that landed with you to me, it sounded fine. Lots of instances that happened around that. Always being told that I'm too direct, always being told that I'm blunt, always being told that, developing relationships are difficult and all those types of things. And I really just never understood. But on top of all of that, I can exist in this world that is not built for me to an extent that was just creating issues for my own mental health, but I can exist. And so walking into a space that is owned by autistic adults and saying, I'm one of you, was a huge leap because I didn't feel as though I could own that label, for lack of a better word, without infringing on their real lived experiences that were, for better or worse, maybe easier for me. And so I had a lot of help. And part of it, and I'll give a shout out to Tara Vance at Neuroclastic, who told me to go get diagnosed immediately after doing an autism event. And her laughing at me the whole time saying, you're one of us. And I was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure. But really kind of walking me through how to show up in this space and letting me know that it was okay, that it was really okay. And I still struggle with this. So as I mentioned, I have a neurodivergent household. My 9-year-old is autistic as well. Just an amazing person. And you will hear me rant and rave and struggle around our school systems and how, the environment is really not built for him. And that's, if you'd like to stay on, I'm happy to rant and rave for a while, but also not, my area of expertise in pedagogy. So I'm also having to reach out for a lot of help of like, how do I get him better supports? Yes, the Neuroclastic. Yeah. And My current position at the state of Colorado is the first place that I disclosed. And this is huge for me because after 3 years of COVID, of being super remote and not having to um, be in a space of where I had to mask all the time, suddenly I kind of forgotten how. And I really, really forced myself to unmask. And when I walked into this new position, I realized that I could not do it anymore. And so this has been a very enlightening time, but it's also been a moment of where I'm actually able to advocate for myself. And I'm actually going through one of those spaces right now, in which I'm having to tell people that some of the phrases and things, the way that they're putting things, are actually incredibly ableist, in a nice, hopefully non-confrontational and loving and gentle way. So, Rebecca, I think what you heard me say was neuroclastic. That's the name of the organization, the nonprofit that Tara Vance runs. And you can find a lot of their information. They also have their own social media sites and other things as well. And I'm happy to share resources around some of those communities. Okay, so, and now that you've heard like a little bit of who I am, before I jump into anything else, do you have any questions for me? Okay, well, feel free at any time to just toss up a hand or anything that feels comfortable for you. I do have chat open and I'll try to monitor it as best I can. All right. So the introduction. Oh, my son is autistic as well. So just as yeah, my son, he's not sick. He's autistic as well. I apologize if that didn't come out clearly. Okay, so introduction to this is just a little bit of what neurodiversity has been described as, has defined as. There are a lot of things that come underneath the neurodiversity bucket, including dyslexia, including bipolar. But the biggest thing is that we are looking at this as people who think differently. And that's kind of where I want to couch this in. Different, we think a little differently, we perceive the world a little bit differently, all of those. So now moving into the disclaimer. And I know this is a lot of text and I apologize with the abundance of text, but I wanted to be very, very clear. I'm going to be speaking about this from the experience of as an autistic late diagnosed adult. And I want to make sure that I'm being also very clear that I am not an expert on neurological conditions, nor am I an expert in all of the, and I'm going to mispronounce this, comorbidities. Please, somebody pronounce that correctly for me, that exist around this. What I want to do is talk about this from a high level of how we can be more inclusive at work and in our different spaces and environment before I kind of jump into and delve into some of the things that we can do to make it a more inclusive space. But again, this is my experience. I don't speak for the entire community. I have some research that I can share with you, but it is not, thank you, Robert. It's one of those words that I read all the time and I don't say. And research that I can share, but I am no way an expert on all things neurodiverse. So please, I know that there's lots of people here that are, and I'm 100% open to all of these conversations. But if I do get something 100% wrong, then please feel free to kind of jump in. Okay. So the first thing that I'd like to do is I did find a video around neurodiversity and celebrating it as, celebrating neurodiversity, and I wanted to share this with you. It reflects a lot of my feelings around some of this, and so I wanted to share it again. My experience, my thoughts, my spot on this particular journey. I might not be where I need to be. So if, we have some comments and thoughts around that, I'm happy to explore it.
Neurological and celebrate their strengths.
Okay.
And find a place in society. Under the medical model of mental health, there's too little attention given to enabling people with neurologically different minds to be accepted for themselves, to discover and celebrate their strengths, and to find a place in society that values their differences. When most of us think of diversity, we think of things like race or sexual orientation, but there's a different kind of diversity you might not know about: neurodiversity. Neurodiversity is the concept that neurological differences among people should be recognized and respected. I believe it's time for this new social movement, the neurodiversity movement, to take off. Diversity is a part of our genetics and of our evolution as a species. The genes for autism and ADHD are not errors, but rather are the result of variations in the human genome.
Okay. So I hear you guys with that. Yeah, we will skip it. I think there's better uses of our time. So let me reshare. And we will just move forward. And yes, I will give you the links to that as well. It's already been shared in chat. And so we can just go, let's just move forward with our discussions. Okay. So my question to you is, and feel free to just toss this into chat, is, what drove you to attend today? So why are you here? I'd love to hear your personal stories or your reasons for being here.
To gain knowledge.
To gain knowledge. Wonderful.
I suffer from ADD and want to gain some understanding and perspective on working with my coworkers, to better communicate myself, as well as take something back to them to help them work with me better.
Okay, great. Great, Katie. And I have thoughts for that as we kind of move through some of this. Being a more supportive person to the students I serve, my own family and coworkers, looking at beginning the process of a personal diagnosis, how to support youth, better to able to help students navigate systems. Yes, Robert, years of having differences seen as performance issues right there. Gaining understanding, curious, to better understand others.
One of my reasons for being here is that my job involves helping technologists and non-technologists collaborate and talk about very spectrum-wide diversities in a group and making sure that we're getting the most out of each other and really celebrating each other instead of kind of factioning, because you can't collaborate if you faction.
Yeah, no, that's great. I'm loving to hear that. I'm seeing a lot of working with students, loving as an opportunity to gain awareness and how I can be a more effective communicator. Great.
Melissa,
Yes.
will your presentation talk about what ableist language looks like how to be conscientious of that?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I hear you. And yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about that as well. Build a community. Maurice, you're awesome. Perfect. So the first thing that I want to do, and just kind of tons of messages here, and I'm loving this, be a leader and everything else. And I have a slide for this beforehand, but one of the first things I want you to do is think about a reframe. Think about how, and this is going to be difficult because we have a lot of programs instilled in our school systems and instilled in our society that tell us to think about autism, ADHD, bipolar, dyslexia, and things like that. And it's always as we are living with a condition. That's always how it's couched and phrased. When we think about these large umbrella advocacy networks. The first reframe that I would like to do and like to have you do, and if this is again this isn't a pointing fingers, this isn't a blame, this is just a societal flex almost that we need to shift, which is identity first language. So, for instance, I am not a person with autism. I am not afflicted. I'm not living with it. I'm an autistic individual, and it's awesome. So that would be that very, very first reframe for everyone. And I know sometimes that when we think about how we want to adjust that lens, it can throw us on defense a little bit and make us a little uncomfortable. And I want to be okay with that because we all go through those spaces, especially with anybody that you're doing this work for yourself, you're doing this work for your students, you're doing this work for your family. Because when we think about just that very slight reframe, it's important to recognize that when we're in the workplace, Janine, you nailed it. Yes. You know, yes. We don't need to consistently and constantly adjust ourselves to our environment in a way that makes us do things like mask. And so I'm hearing a lot of comments and seeing a lot of comments about how I want to communicate better. Great, we all should. Everybody should. That's not a neurodiverse thing. I want to help people understand me. How about help people understand your needs? We set ourselves up initially as deficits in the workspace because we think of that language that we hear all the time, that societal impact, that tells us that we're living with an affliction, and we are not afflicted. Okay, so I'm going to start with that, and that was like my first hard language lesson for the morning. Okay. So when we think about the workplace itself, we have a lot of frameworks in a lot of different organizations, and it can be called a lot of different things. We have diversity, equity, and inclusion. We have diversity, equity, and belonging, diversity, equity, belonging, and justice. We have a lot of these umbrellas in which we couch diversity work. And this is in multiple stages of different organizations. What often is either segmented or not included underneath this umbrella is disability. And we also oftentimes considering that disability tends to be often its own space because they think of it as an accommodation rather than an inclusivity. And not to say that disabilities don't require accommodation, of course they do. But it should be within your DEI umbrella. And that's one of those things that we can continue to advocate for. I want to jump to chat back here. Lauren says that I was recently taught to use person first language. And I would challenge that as, is it what the community thinks itself, or is it what practitioners and advocates that are not part of the community say? Because that tends to be where the debate is couched in one way or the other. Primarily neurodivergent house. We don't teach how to fit in. We teach into how care, feeding of neurotypicals, and what they might need as supports from us to feel comfortable. Shannon, I love this so much. I love that. There's a fantastic meme running around Facebook right now that's like, I love a person with allism, which I think is great. So that aside. So Lauren, I appreciate you bringing that up because one of the things that the autistic community continuously deals with, and speaking as, from that representation, and is speaking as a parent also of an autistic child, is the amount of ABA, BCBA practitioners. And I don't want to start this out and I don't want to jump into a conversation of whether or not practitioners are good or bad or anything like that. But I will say this, that ABA in generally teaches autistic children to mask, teaches autistic children to fit in with social norms in society, and that they are taught that being autistic is not the correct way to be. Now, all of that being said, for parents, there are not a lot of options out there. So I don't want to do like poo-poo ABA. I don't. I have requested that it's not used on my child, but there's a lot of uphill battles in this. And so in people with some areas that don't have access to any other resources, sometimes you have to pick and choose those battles of how to navigate that system. So I'll say that and kind of leave that there. So I'm going to jump back to some of these questions. And Linda, that's a great point. The deaf community and autistic community seem to prefer deaf person, autistic person. And I've also, this is one of my favorites. I've seen that used to also indicate an auditory disability. So anyway, there's lots of things in there. So when kind of coming back into our presentation here a little bit around the disability aspect. One of the things that we have done in my organization is ours is actually under the acronym of IDEA. And it's inclusivity, diversity, equity, and accessibility. So we've used the accessibility piece in order to include all aspects of inclusivity to also also bring in the disability component. And this is one of those things that we can continue to work towards within our organizations. Now, to kind of come back a little bit to the question or comment around having ADD and ADHD in the workplace, honestly, I think there are so many things that people tend to, there's so many myths around disabilities. And so there's so many ways that we can educate people around ourselves. And this is one of the things that I talk about within my own organization is like neurodiverse people, we love to tell you how our brains work because our brains are very cool, but also because we've been told for most of our lives that how our brains work is wrong. So being in a place where we can celebrate ourselves and talk about how our thought processes work, and I describe mine as a constellation. There's constantly millions of little points working all the time, and I'm just trying to connect them together. And I love telling people about that because it's the first time in my life that I've been able to describe this in a way that makes sense to me and represents who I am and how I think. Before, I would describe it or be described as circular thinking. And that always frustrated me. So just giving you kind of that anecdotal moment. So going back to this point of how we talk about ourselves, the person first language, this tends to come from, and this is taught, and it's very prevalent. It is taught to practitioners, it is taught by advocates, it is taught by other researchers and things like that to use person first language. And that is that a person with, a person afflicted by, a person living with. So reiterating here. However, the autistic community itself, and there has been numerous polls and surveys done by different networks, ASAN, Neuroclastic even, and a few others, and forgive me, I have these resources for you after. But the autistic community, the majority, 78% and higher, prefer identity first language. And so that does mean that referring to ourselves as I'm an autistic adult. There's that cattail I was telling you guys about. Robert, can you speak a little bit more about that? Do you mean just generally referring to a person as I'm a person with a disability?
Yeah, yes. I mean,
Okay.
it's how people refer to me and how I see myself as well. I mean, either one basically gets the message across that although I am a person just like most other people, I do have a physical disability.
Mm-hmm.
And it may not be evident because I look like I'm quote unquote normal or don't have any problems.
Right.
Yet how I'm being referred to is, you know, is, I guess, I don't see a differentiation, a difference between the two terms. Although I understand what you're saying, that some professionals refer to people in the spectrum a certain way, and people in the community refer to themselves a different way also. And it was a good point about from Linda referring to deaf person or person that has a hearing disability.
Right.
So I mean, you know, to me, it's like they're equitable, they're equal terms.
Hmm.
But to other people, I guess it's not.
No, and I think what I'm trying to convey here is as we open a conversation. So for instance, in the beginning of this, I gave you pronouns.
Right.
And as we consider how we each like to be addressed, this is also an opportunity for a discussion. So Carl says, am I an older person or a person afflicted with age? Okay, so I'm going to take that as a little tongue in cheek. But I'm also going to say that Carl, you know, however you identify is great with me, and I'm going to respect that. So if you are a person that prefers person first language, I am all over that, and I'm going to respect your preferences. As a person walking into a situation and just in general and being inclusive in a workspace environment, I'm going to come at it with identity first language, because I know that for the communities, this is where they start. But that doesn't mean I'm going to disrespect anybody's individual preferences. Does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am.
Awesome. Thank you for that. That was super helpful. And I think it is exactly where we needed to go. So I appreciate you, Robert.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I'm just going to go back here. Linda, the community overall would decide on a preference and educate the rest of us about what that is. And communicate, and individuals may also communicate their preferences too. Yeah, absolutely. Exactly, mirroring language, Whitney. Thank you so much. Yes, Carl, very nice. Okay, so I think we're on the same page. We're starting at this. The important step here is we're not dictating overall, like this is what it has to be, but I think the overall concept of why language matters. And of course, for most of us, I think stepping into this with, you know, a sense of empathy and a sense of understanding, and also a sense of humbleness, because we're in different places, all of us. And so earlier when the question was asked around ableist language, sometimes that means that we also need to learn a little bit more about community preferences with the understanding that we may also and should approach each individual. Jessica, did you want to jump in a little bit more on that? And it's okay if you don't. I know I'm putting you on the spot.
I just appreciate learning what kind of language I should probably be aware of or avoid. It'd be best practice to stay away from, something I may not even consciously know, like the message I'm sending.
Mhm.
I found that in, what was it, the first of the talk series that y'all did, there was a lot of language that I was using that I probably needed to reframe. So I was hoping to learn more about that, but this discussion is helping me kind of think about those things.
No, perfect. Thank you, Jessica. And I really appreciate that. And you're absolutely right. And I will tell you that I am not, oh gosh, how to phrase this? There are so many things embedded in us as a culture that we don't even think about. Things that we will say, we will personify, things that we will do, and just in order to replicate societal norms. And this often is starts beginning in the places of, where ableist language can come from. And we don't even think about it. So going back to, even just how we talk about neurodiversity in the workplace and how we create areas of inclusivity, I think it's just important to recognize that the language will continue to evolve. And there are things that we don't know and things that we don't realize that are embedded in us. And it's important to come at this, as we do with all things around DEI, from a place of understanding that language is going to change and that we're also always learning, regardless of where we're coming from, regardless of lived experiences, because this is an intersection, not one being more important than the other. So with that being said, it's just a great space to kind of walk into, right, realizing that we're going to mess up, and that's okay. Does that make sense? All right. Oops, too far. Back. So we asked questions about, how can we make workplaces more neurodiversity or neurodiverse friendly? Oftentimes when we think about how we consider things, especially the stigma around being neurodiverse. So there's so many, yes, Jessica, absolutely. There are so many stigmas and myths around being neurodiverse, and especially around things like autism. You think about how autism is portrayed in the media. You think about how people have, entire stories that they have created around their journeys, their children's journeys and things like that. And some of these don't always come from an empowering and supportive place. But these are the concepts in the media that we're fed a lot. And not to say that there aren't great stories and great pieces out there. I'm just saying that in general, though, they're not all great. And so with that, there's a lot of information that people take with them and internalize, and they don't necessarily realize it. So for instance, and I'm just my experience here, I've had a person come back to me and say, after they had made an ableist comment, that was actually very, it wasn't just like a microaggression, it was a full-on, like, very bad comment. And I confronted him like, hey, as an autistic person, that's not super cool. And the response was like, oh, I had no idea. Okay, fine. I'm not jumping in that. But the second question was like, don't worry, I don't associate you with any of the negative stereotypes around autism. And I stopped for a second and my response was like, thanks. And that to me is the first, that's the first obstacle, is that there are so many negative stereotypes around neurodiversity and the different flavors of neurodiversity. And so that to me is like that first battleground, because this is one of those spaces where that disability can be invisible. It could be something that, you know, we don't necessarily disclose. And if we do choose to disclose, then of course the ownership comes on us to educate everyone around us about it. So when we think about how we can embrace our neurodiverse workplace, my immediate suggestion is to set it up with the assumption that everyone is. Having opportunities for sensory reduction, having opportunities to set up remote workspaces, or if you happen to be in a hybrid workspace, not forcing people to have their cameras on, things like that, letting people show up as who they are, and just kind of encouraging that in general. To me, that's one of the first steps. And that's exactly how I run my team. Interestingly enough, my entire team is neurodiverse. And the the entire team did not disclose that until I walked in and said, this is who I am. And suddenly my entire team disclosed. And then as it moved on, I now have managers from other departments coming to me for coaching on how they can disclose to their teams that they're neurodiverse. So that to me is one of the first steps for me. And it's not easy, was not easy at all, but just take that step and kind of jump out into this representation. If that's something that you're comfortable with, that can be one of those spaces where you're setting the tone for inclusion by, you know, acknowledging your own representation. If that's not a comfortable space for you, that's totally fine. But setting up your workspace and your work environment, and, you know, if you're a leader of a team, to be more inclusive of people who are neurodiverse overall, I think setting that as the stage of just that's the baseline is one of those ways that you can create a more inclusive environment. And it may take a little bit more research on your part of what that looks like, how you're allowing people to show up in meetings, how you're allowing people to communicate, how you're allowing people to submit their work. And that means being very conscious of creating multiple avenues for access that may not have existed before. So consider, you know, what that looks like for your team currently. If you're a person who is looking to advocate for others and advocate for yourself, this is a space where you can start kind of setting that tone by saying, well, you know, I've already used all my spoons today. I'm camera off for the rest of the afternoon. And that might be how you need to show up. Now, I'm going to say that with the caveat of not everybody has the privilege of being able to kind of buck against a system a little bit. So totally recognizing that. And that means some coping strategies might need to go into your day and how you wind down. But the ultimate goal here is not having to mask, right? Well, for me, I'll say. So starting with recognizing the person's individual strengths and talents as well. This is going to be one of the things that we do to make sure that we are not focusing on this, let's say, for an autism individual, calling what they do a superpower, rather than saying, hey, you're just a fantastic performer. You're great at your job. And couching it in the same way that you would for any person. Not in spite of, not because of, not with the disability. So you kind of get where I'm going at. It would be very similar to me, and I hate using this example, but to put it in a very blunt term so that it kind of carries through, it would be similar to me or anyone saying, wow, you know, you're very articulate for a person of color. Oh, terrible. I hate saying that. Makes my whole being uncomfortable. But if you understand kind of where that stereotypical, discriminatory language comes from, it's very similar. Wow, I never expected you to be able to get all your tasks done. That's great for somebody with ADHD. And these are things that are like commonly said. So that's why I'm kind of throwing that. Oh, yeah, Janina, I hear you. That just, again, my whole body like cringes for that one. Okay. So appreciate you guys kind of coming along with this journey so far. So remember, we're thinking about this in terms of inclusivity, of setting the bar. And this is something too, when you start considering, how things are set up for advocating for students and other things. It's not because of, it's not in spite of, it's not, and we do this already, especially for our youth that, we are trying to get away from ideological practices like blaming a person for being in poverty and things like that, deficit ideology. So consider that framework in these spaces as well. So one of the things that, and I'm going to make sure we're good on time here. Yeah. One of the things that I want to ask you to do is having a reframe. And I talked about this a little bit before, but I want you to think about this in a much larger scale. And I'll give you like a personal story. And with this, I'll caveat, or not caveat, but I'll like throw the disclaimer out that I'm going to tell you a story about my mother-in-law, and she's not a bad person. Okay. Only because there's so many mother-in-law jokes out there. One of the things my son's grandmother, my mother-in-law, just absolutely drove her crazy is that my son will not sit to eat dinner. Like he just will not sit down and just, sit there for 30 minutes with the family and have dinner. And that is okay. Like it is not a hill I'm going to die on. He likes to get up. He likes to move around. Sometimes he likes to have his iPad. He is fully on the chicken nugget diet. This is a very consistent meal for him. He feels very comfortable with it. And you know what? We're good. He's healthy. He's happy, right? But it drove her absolutely bananas. And so, yes, Shannon, 100%. But the thing is that it wasn't a need. This was a social norm that for her created an avenue of respect and engagement, spending time with the family, quality time with the family. And that is framed into that societal cultural notion that eating together creates family space. Now, I'm not saying it doesn't. Don't get me wrong. We have, dinners and the whole bit. It's not all anarchy over here in this house, but that's where I want you to challenge some of these notions. Does that mean that he is being disrespectful because he gets up and dances around a little bit and then comes back? Does it mean that he's not listening to us because he has an iPad going? Does it mean that he doesn't care about us because he's not engaged in our conversations? It doesn't. He's doing all of those things on his terms. He is just not fitting into the mold that has been prescribed to him from an aspect, from a frame of what someone is used to. I will give you the same example around eye contact. Look at me when I'm talking to you. Oh, heads popped up. That was fun. But is it necessary? Eye contact is a socialized norm in which we are normalized to feel that it's necessary that we know we're being heard. Look at me when I am talking to you. It is not their need to receive communication, nor to express communication, but our need to feel as though we've been heard and understood. Kind of get where I'm going with this? So it is taking that frame and applying it in multiple circumstances. I get back reports on my son that he tunes his teachers out. I'm like, no, he doesn't. Trust me, he hears everything you say. So with that, I'm sharing this with you as part of my own learning journey Like you don't walk into these situations, especially when you know nothing about it before. And you don't know, there isn't a manual. I mean, there's not a manual for parenting in the first place, my goodness. But then you have the added of how to truly show up for someone in a different way. And we're all, myself included, struggling with these types of norms. And I've done it. I've been there. I've done it. I've told my kid to, hey, can we process this differently? And I say that after years of learning how to stop saying like, okay, I don't get why you're crying. Putting the ownership back on them, which is it's not okay. But I'm sharing this with you as part of my own learning journey for myself and for my kiddo. That having this simple reframe of, is it a personal preference or is it a personal need? And what does that mean? Okay, so that was a lot right there. I'm going to come back to chat for a second. Yeah, Pam says, my adult neurodivergent sons, we play cards, we go out to eat. Yeah, same. I won't lie. There's a lot of phone time and screen time going on in our house. It means food. His food won't stop at the belly. It'll go to his feet. Lauren's, I'm also self-diagnosed. My husband's family all love to hug. He won't talk to them for me and tell them I can't hug. I was suffering and I just exploded one day and said, I don't like hugs. Lauren, same, had that almost very same conversation. And this was before I really knew why it was so uncomfortable for me. And I was just that jerk. I was that jerk in the family that didn't like to be touched. Their opinion hasn't changed, but I'm okay with it now. So I hear you. Thank you for sharing that. Yes, Robert, thank you for that. Parents too often stress about how their child's behavior is a reflection of their value. Yeah. And let's see. Jessica says, I have a lot to work on my community. You have not been a jerk. This is a process. But it's one of those like aha moments. And I won't lie, my partner and I have had a lot of them. Even confronting the way that he was raised as, a person from a, middle-class family in a rural town, that had those values of like boys don't cry and those types of things. I mean, all of that, like those are constant things that we have to work through as well. For my fun childhood, I was raised by a narcissistic parent. So, that just adds a fun layer by all the things, but that's a whole other workshop and therapy. Like you would all be my therapist. I'd have to pay you. So with that being said, really appreciate the comments here. And really all I want to do in this particular moment is just plant that seed. Like, how are we framing the conversations? And is it the need? Is it a societal preference? I'm working with a school district now that is not as supportive, and we're having to have a lot of conversations. And I have had, I've had a principal couch conversations in the boy who cried wolf. And I'm like, that's not a thing. Like that shouldn't be a methodology for teaching. Or people who say things like, I agree to this to a certain extent, with the exception of the neurodivergent platform, which is we teach people how to treat us. I'm like, but do we? There's so many ways, and society tells us how to treat each other and whose worth is more. We've had far too many cases of having people tell us that if our son is disruptive, he is taking away opportunities from other children, which the implied message there is his life is worth less. So thinking about how we frame those conversations, how we think about those things. Okay, Robert, great question. And thank you for getting us back on track, because I was totally going to tangent there. How do we help supervisors be more supportive of neurodivergent staff? Fantastic question. And I think setting the baseline there of recognizing that inclusivity includes, disabilities. So when we consider communication is the biggest one, obviously, and how people prefer to communicate. And it's allowing people to communicate the ways that they prefer, and allowing people to show up in a way by saying things in the aspect of, hey, we're going to create this event, and for, our hybrid staff and for our remote staff and for our neurodivergent staff, we can do all of those things. But I think if we set the baseline of inclusivity overall and where it's threaded into all of these concepts, but the biggest one obviously is going to be education. When we talk about neurodiversity, people don't know what that means. When we talk about autism, people don't know what that means. Their only awareness around it may be the Good Doctor or Sheldon or, something like that. And when that is the only space of information that they have, we get comments like, I don't associate you with the negative stereotypes of autism. So if we have a supervisor who is willing and wants to learn more, my first recommendation is to hook them up with communities that advocate for autism. ASAN is a fantastic organization. It is autistic led, and it is one that helps educate people and provides resources. And there are other networks around this. Again, I appreciate you guys kind of coming along with me as my focus being within my own representation, but this is, and I can provide more resources for you, but there's lots of areas in which we look for spaces of education that are representative of the communities. That's the important one here too. And this is a fantastic segue. So Robert, to answer that a little bit more, is when you are looking for research to help educate your supervisors, yourself, and other things, you want to look for organizations that are representative of their communities. So for instance, Autism Speaks. If you want to take a really good look at them, they are not represented. They do not have autistic persons on their board, within their management, within their supervisory staff. Their mission up until very, very recently was before to cure autism. Thank you, Janine. So we want to make sure that we're looking for resources that are representative of the community that you are, looking to educate yourself or others about. So for instance, I am not going to give you a workshop on what it's like to be a Black woman. Okay. I am, however, going to lead this workshop today on what it's like to be an autistic adult. In my place in the journey for me. So you kind of get where I'm going with this. You're going to see a lot, and there's so much content out there. And this is where you need to dig in a little bit into who the leadership is, who represents the community, and who is trying to find supports and are advocating for, especially, students who are transitioning into adulthood and adults, because there's just very little resources for autistic adults out there. Oh yeah, the Neurodivergent Rebel, totally awesome. Neurotribes is completely awesome. Gosh, I can give you a whole list of, especially like social media communities. Neuroclastic is one of my favorites because there's just a ton of resources there. Let's see, but yeah, we can go into this and definitely check out some of the resources that are being noted here in chat. The Autism OT is fantastic. She is also deaf, and so she does some amazing work around that intersection. I'm trying to think of who else. Autistic Typing, Indigenous woman who does some amazing advocacy work as well as telling about her own experiences. I actually had her as a speaker at Penn State. She's just amazing to work with. And there's more. There's so many more. Books, and I will recommend Neurotribes. And that one it gives a really good history of autism in the United States, as well as diagnoses. He even talks a little bit about Asperger and Canon, and the origination of the diagnosis and how it was diagnosed up until the DSM-5. Very important kind of note there in that in diagnoses, you know, we had that transition where prior to DSM-5, the diagnosis criteria for autism, especially in children, was childhood schizophrenia. And so, yeah, lots of things there, but Neurotribes really goes into that, and why when people say, oh, you know, so many kids these days are being diagnosed, I'm like, not really. It's not a big change. It's just that they're being diagnosed correctly. So one of those great things to think about. So this is where I kind of wanted to end us, in that just recognizing that representation matters. When it comes to language and talking about things within the workplace, you know, leaning into somebody else's preferences is definitely one of those best ways to go, but absolutely jumping into that space of, you know, starting with the identity first language is just a great place to start. And then of course, having those conversations. Yes, and I can. What we are trying to do, and we're kind of in the process of this, and I'm still working on it, super behind on getting resources out, and I apologize, is we have created a resource page that you can find off of the event page that has the recordings of all of the sessions that we've been able to record. There we'll also be uploading our participant guides, which will have the resources and things as well. And so I won't lie, I'm behind on that, but we're getting there. All right, so I want to give us a couple of minutes. We're getting very close to time. I had allowed for an extra few minutes for today's sessions, but I know people have to jump off at the hour. So, Robert, great question. How do we protect young staff from some of the career pitfalls that exist? It's a really good, that's a very broad question as well. One of the biggest things is researching an organization, especially as they are looking for the careers that they're going into, recognizing that their neurodiversity is going to be strengths, and also that there may be areas in which they need to be very cognizant of, as environments are not always going to be able to be molded to them. So utilizing their talents in a way that they know is going to be successful, but also going into an organization that is going to be willing to set them up for success. So that means researching the organizations, like their values, their mission, their goals, their diversity, and even, you know, reaching out as part of, you know, their research to talk to their, you know, chief diversity officer or somebody like that to say, you know, how do you treat people within, you know, your community, within your organization that are neurodiverse. Another part, yes, and absolutely mentoring is definitely for one. I've been using, honestly, because I'm at that stage of my career and in my personal life where my privilege now exists in a level where I can walk in and sponsor this concept and this discussion. I'm definitely using that. And it's not easy because and I'm just saying that as like, for me personally, it's not super comfortable, but I feel at this point that that's what my privilege should be used for. So walking into the spaces and saying, you know, hey, have you guys realized that this is not, you know, this is not a great environment for neurodiverse people? Or, you know, as we're having conversations about returning to work, and me pointing out every single time that a hybrid and remote environment is preferable to our neurodiverse community. And so what are we going to do about that? So making sure that the voices that we're using, especially as we're advocating for others, continuously point those things out. As someone is seeking a diagnosis for themselves or is advocating for another, which we recommend they start with a psychiatrist if you can. Go through your medical network and see if you can. And there's other people out there that are going to give you advice on this as well, but that's where I finally made some headway. I started with my primary doctor, got a referral. The referral didn't work out. You know, we talked about genetic testing and other things like that. But what we ended up doing, what I ended up finally having success with, is once I got to, and I'm going to be really honest, psychiatrist number 2, because not the first one. That was where I was finally able to kind of start working through some of the criteria for diagnosis. And again, it's not easy because they use the tools that they have are for kids. And females present differently. So Yeah, it's a fun journey. Okay, other questions for today? And so what I'm going to do for you in the participant guide and the resources that I will send out is, one, I'm going to give you some communities that are very active and representative of neurodiverse, multiple neurodiverse communities. I'm also going to provide for you, because Jessica, you made a really good point, and I didn't have this already, and I want to, which is that great table that Anne created for her body positivity, which was, hey, instead of saying this, say this. Because I think that can be very helpful as a guide. So I'm loving you for all of that. Thank you, guys. If you have any questions, always feel free to reach out to me. My contact information is here. And I'm always willing to share, always willing to talk. But most importantly, if I don't know it, and oftentimes I don't, I will get you to the people that do. All right, everyone, I hope you have a lovely day. I see the direct message. I'm recording this, and the person who sent it to me. And I'm going to send you some information there too. Because that's a great question. I'm going to follow up on that. And I'll send it the resources to everyone, but I want to make sure that that person knows that I've addressed it. Awesome. All right. Thank you. Have a wonderful, we are named twins. All right. Have a wonderful day. I'm going to stop our recording there.